And now, from beyond our dimension, this is the JeffMara podcast. Here's Jeff.
My guest is Allan Lavigne, former investigator with the now legendary UFO group A.P.R.O. He was a principal investigator for many of the most high-profile abduction cases of the 1970s, and I brought him back today to talk about which cases he believes are real and which ones are not. Allan, welcome back. It's great to see you again.
Thank you, Jeff. It's great to be back again. I appreciate it.
So for people meeting you for the first time today, what is or was A.P.R.O. and what was your position there?
Well, A.P.R.O. was the first private organization to investigate UFOs. Began in 1952 with Jim and Coral Lorenzen. It was actually run right out of the Holloman Air Force Base press office. Coral Lorenzen was the press secretary for the base. And from 1952 to 1960, they operated A.P.R.O. right out of the Holloman Air Force Base itself, sent out a monthly newsletter that went all over the world. At its peak, there were nearly 3,000 members of A.P.R.O. worldwide, which doesn't sound big today, but was during the time of snail mail, and so there was no social media or internet at that time, so that was quite a few people involved. In 1960, they moved the operation to Tucson, Arizona. Part of that reason, Tucson, Arizona was really an important city during the Cold War. It was home to Davis-Monthan Air Force Base, the Strategic Air Command base, where all the B-52s were stationed, and where if there had been a nuclear strike, they would have been one of the principal Air Force bases that was carried out with. We were also surrounded with Gemini Titan nuclear missiles, which they are still there to this day. And it was also home to Hughes Aircraft at the time, which was one of the premier aerospace companies, and they were working on early NASA space flight equipment. They worked on the LEM. My parents both worked at Hughes Aircraft. And at that time, Hughes was like Area 51. It was way out in the middle of the desert. And if you drove up there, you saw the same signs you see at Area 51, lethal force authorized, do not pass this point. Now it's much closer to the city. The city's built out to it. But back then, it was way out in the middle of the desert. You wouldn't know it was there until you got right up on it. But anyway, A.P.R.O. moved there in 1960s, and during the 70s, Project Blue Book ended in 67, and A.P.R.O. really picked up their pace as far as investigating UFO encounters and abductions all through the 60s. I worked on some of the most prominent cases, Sergeant Charles Moody, 1974, Travis Walton, 1975, Herman, Bill Herman, 1975 also, Betty Andreessen. I was the first to interview Jesse Marcel in 1978. He had been passed to us by Leonard Springfield, who wrote the definitive book on crash retrievals that was released in 1977. We at A.P.R.O. assisted him from our files to help him put that book together. And he passed Jesse on to us, and I interviewed him for the first time in 78. It was actually it was actually early 79. And we did an on-camera interview for the first time, released in the documentary film UFOs Are Real in the summer of 79. That was his first on-camera appearance. And we really thought at that time that disclosure was right around the corner. We had good reason to believe that, which is another long story. But we expected Marcel's film debut to be like the Age of Disclosure documentary has been recently. We thought this was going to break everything loose, and he was the first high-profile, high-ranking intelligence officer to ever state on the record that UFOs are real and the Roswell case was real, and we thought that was going to break everything loose. Unfortunately, it did. But those were some of my principal investigations. I also investigated in 1980 the Betty Andreessen case, which actually occurred. The case itself, actually, her abduction actually occurred in the late 1960s, but the case didn't come to fruition until 1980.
Hmm.
So that's my background. With that, since that time, I'm retired now, but I was terrorist liaison officer for Homeland Security. I started with the Paris Task Force after returning from Washington, D.C. After 9/11, and worked in the San Francisco Bay Area. I taught counter surveillance detection with San Francisco PD and Oakland PD, and other members of the terrorist task force. And I retired in 2019.
Hmm.
I do still keep in touch there, yeah, every once in a while to do analysis unrelated to the UFO field, but that's my background. I also had a second career in the entertainment field, um, uh, which ran simultaneously with my law enforcement background. Um, uh, I did films with Marvel, Lucas, Warner Brothers, a lot of TV work and stuff. And I have two museum exhibits of my work. One is the San Francisco Cartoon Art Museum in San Francisco, and at the San Diego Comic-Con Museum in Balboa Park. And there's also a temporary exhibit at the San Diego airport right now of my work.
That's cool. Let's get to some of these cases. You were the very first person to interview Travis Walton, right?
Yes.
All right.
Uh,
What do you think about his case? Legit or not?
I believe it's legitimate. I first learned about it literally through a newspaper article. Was literally at a grocery store, saw the newspaper article that he was missing. I reported that to Jim Lorenzen because the story was so outrageous. And for the next 5 days, I have to say, even myself included, we believed he had been murdered by his crew. People say that, oh, I was looking at the internet a couple days ago, and they were saying, some people say, oh, this was a hoax because they wanted to get out their federal contract for logging, which is ridiculous. These people were looking at murder charges. Um, no one believes that. And even though they had undergone polygraphs successfully before Travis was ever turned back up, uh, uh, they, they were looking at murder charges, and no one's going to face murder charges to perpetrate a UFO hoax. That's just absolutely ridiculous. Um, and what happened? Coral contacted his brother-in-law after he was recovered, and asked if we could interview Travis. He was at Tucson Medical Center. I lived in Tucson, of course, at that time, and she arranged for me to interview him. I went to Tucson Medical Center. My then wife worked at actually Tucson Medical Center at that time, but they wouldn't allow me to go to his room. So I had to interview him over the telephone in the lobby of Tucson Medical Center. And I was first to interview him even before sheriffs or law enforcement, and got his story, which has remained consistent um, ever since then. And he's never extrapolated on it or infused it with other elements. And some things that he shared really ran home. And he admits this now, although I postulated it back then in 75, that he wasn't shot by a ray gun or anything from the ship, but that in Arizona, any private aviator will tell you this. The dry air climate, if you're flying a private plane or whatever, it'll pick up a large static electric charge. And if you have like a little Piper Cub or one of these small little private planes, there's a little chain that hangs out from the plane. So when it lands, that chain hits the ground and it grounds the plane. It takes all the static electricity out of it, because if you go near that plane before it's discharged, it could kill you. It's the static electric charge is so strong. And I think what happened is this ship, which rang true to me, had picked up a static electric charge, a large charge, and when he stood up beyond the little wood pile he was hiding behind, he was close enough for it to discharge, and that's what struck him and knocked him on his rear end, possibly even stopped his heart. It's certainly strong enough to do that. And that's when his fellow loggers took off, and when they returned, he was gone. And for those that aren't familiar with Arizona, I I can share with you that there's no one who's going to survive without food and water in the White Mountain Range for a week. And he was badly dehydrated when he was transported to the hospital. He had not had any food or water during those 5 days, and that's right on the brink of dying. 5 days without water, you're really tickling the dragon then. And again, I don't see anybody risking their life for a story which he's really. uh, He would be the first to tell you that he'd wish it never had happened to him. He doesn't relish the celebrity, and it's certainly not never made any money of any sort off it. There was a film made. The film is not at all accurate, and someday maybe there's been a number of documentaries that are more accurate, but uh, it would make a good film if they did it right. But he's never made any money off this, so I really believe he's legitimate individual. Unfortunately, I've never had an opportunity to speak to him again since my first interview with him back there. I would have uh, someday maybe we'll cross paths again. Um, Maybe at I'm thinking of going to convention here in the spring down south. Was it Contact in the Desert?
Mhm.
And if he's there, I'd love to connect with him again and just chat with, because like I said, I've never spoken to him again since then. But
Well,
yeah, yeah.
you would think that the ETs could at least given him some water if he was so dehydrated.
I who knows, what they knew about human, physiology or
Right.
or anything, but
Good point.
uh, I have no idea. Have
Mm.
no idea, but uh, they did. He was very badly dehydrated and had not eaten either. So,
Well, what about the Billy Meyer case? Because that's one of the most popular ones out there. What do you know about that?
well, I can tell you what we learned at A.P.R.O. And I can't say anything beyond when I left A.P.R.O. in 1980, what he's experienced since then. But I can tell you what we learned at that time. Now, uh, with A.P.R.O., anytime we came across something that we could not find evidence for, we never said, "Oh, these people are lying or they're hoaxing or whatever," unless there was absolutely evidence. They admitted, "Oh yeah, we're hoaxing," but we never called anybody a liar or anything like this. We just said, "Okay, we're not getting the evidence we need here to prove this case, or there's evidence that's exhibiting that there's really probably nothing here." What happened with the Billy Myers case? Again, I learned of it. The pictures were published in a UFO magazine, which were remarkable. When I saw my jaw dropped. I go like this could be it. And again, I contacted Jim right away. Jim knew the publisher of the magazine, got in contact with him, and he put us in contact with Billy Myers. And we said, we want to, authenticate your case. We need negatives. This is at a time long before digital photography. And we were working with the Kodak Center in Phoenix to authenticate photographs, and McAfee as well, the former NASA engineer, to authenticate photographs. And so we need a negative. We chose a particular photograph that we thought would be most instructive. And Meyer said, he'd send us a negative. We never received it. He claimed it was stolen. We thought that was very possible because that was not unusual back then. Because you know, we had our mail stolen, that we'd sent to people or disappeared. Can't say it was stolen; it just disappeared. And back then, there was no way to trace mail or anything, and there'd be times that film negatives would disappear at the drugstore, things. So again, this is in the 70s and didn't have the uh, technology and stuff that we do today. Well, anyway, we never got the negative. And so we said, okay, what we're going to do, excuse me, we're going to send you an 8 millimeter camera, film camera. And next time because he was saying that, yeah, I'm in communication with these uh, uh, Pleiadians, and they're just telling me stuff. And okay, we're going to give you a camera next time they come, film it. So we sent him Super 8 camera, film camera, to photograph it. And we waited. We weren't getting the film. And in the meantime, I was showed up this guy showed up at my door, um, claimed to be retired Air Force. He had just left the Air Force. He was in his early 30s or so. And he said, "Hey, I hear you work with A.P.R.O and you're the guy to talk to about UFO investigation and stuff. I was in the Air Force. I'm really interested in UFOs and I'd like to learn more, maybe join A.P.R.O." And I thought, well, who sent this guy to my house? Who is he? And is Jim just sending people randomly to my house? I thought maybe it was Wendell Stevens, who was also a friend and another investigator at A.P.R.O. But he seemed harmless enough. Young guy, kind of hippie looking, long hair, beard, and looked harmless. And I let him in, and we chatted, and I shared that Wendell Stevens, one of our investigators, was going to do a lecture at a church a few days forward and show his collection of UFO photographs from all over the world. And Wendell had the most extensive collection of UFO photographs, good photographs that many have never ever been published. He had 2 tintype photographs that were taken in the early 1900s by an elderly individual who was on his way to his granddaughter's birthday party. The 2 of the most remarkable photographs I've ever seen of what I would describe as a giant tic tac flying over a mesa. Um, and he was able to get 2 photographs of tintype photographs of this before it disappeared. And those have never been published. Well, anyway, Wendell was going to show his archive and do a little lecture and stuff. I said, "Hey, I'll take you, I'll introduce you, and you'll see some photographs and get your feet wet." Okay, great. So met him there at the church. Saw Wendell's lecture. Introduced him to Wendell. Wendell said, "Hey, why don't you come by my place and I'll show you some other photographs and stuff." So, oh, great, excellent. So we planned to go the following week, and this individual from the Air Force, he never, he would always show up on bicycle, and Wendell's home was like a long way on the other side of town. And I said, "Well, you can't bicycle over there." I said, "Tell me where to meet you. Where are you living, and I'll pick you up." "Oh, no, just meet me at the corner of Alvernon and Bellevue and or Alvernon back Blackledge, and I'll jump in your car. We'll go over there." So that's what we did. And we got over to Wendell's house, and Wendell had his private study where he did all his UFO stuff and pictures all over the wall and stuff. And he brought us back there. And just as we got in the room, Wendell's telephone rang. And Wendell said, "Oh, excuse me, I got to go get the phone," before cell phones or anything like that. Or even, there weren't many people that even had answering machines at the time. And so he left the room. And this Air Force guy went to Wendell's desk, and I remember exactly where it was. It was in the left-hand drawer. Pulls open the drawer, pulls out a stack of envelopes, goes through them, pulls out an envelope, and gives it to me. And I go, "What are you doing?" What? He says, "Just look at this." And so I looked at it. It was addressed to Wendell, no return address, and foreign postmarking on it. I opened it up, and there's a handful of photographs of Myers building these models. And taken from behind, but clearly showing some were close-ups of models, and we could see defects in the models that we could identify in the photographs that had been published. And back then, when you took a photograph, there was like a date marker in the border of the photograph. And these were all dated before the photographs were ever published. And uh, just as I'm looking through this stack, Wendell comes back in the den and he sees what we're doing. I go like, "What is this?" And he's kind of beshuffled and he goes, "Oh yeah, I don't know who sent me those. I asked Billy about that, and he says he was just trying to recreate the models of the craft he had seen." I said, "Well, these are dated before the pictures were ever published." And he says, "Well, I'm sure there's a reason for that." And I said, "Well, I'm gonna have to talk to Jim about this." And he said, "Oh yeah, fine. I don't. It's okay." So I told Jim, and wasn't long after that we got film from Billy, which you can still see on the internet, of three UFOs, that these Pleiadian ships, and they're clearly dangling from strings on a branch. You can just see them. But we did send the film to the Kodak Center in Phoenix and also the University of Arizona, and they both said, "Yeah, these conform to pendulum theory." So we said, "Okay, we're we're done with this. This isn't going anywhere. So whatever." And Life magazine, who had intended to publish a book um, on the Myers case as disclosure, they were going to authenticate this and everything. They backed out of that. They published the book as just uh, a a coffee table curiosity, basically. Beautiful pictures, but we're not saying they're real or not. It's just beautiful pictures, and it never went anywhere. Wendell always believed Billy, and he actually had his archive after he passed away. He had his archive of photographs sent to an archive that Billy has overseas, and there's still a lot of people that follow Billy. I can't say that afterwards and he didn't have contact afterwards, but what we saw gave us great, you know, concern about the authenticity. We did see originally he sent us two photographs um, that we believe were real photographs that he took outside his truck of, it looked like a plasma orb like we're seeing today, reddish brown. This was a daylight sighting, and we believe those were probably authentic. Uh, but afterwards, these Pleiades things, at least the ones that we saw in those photographs, we just didn't give it much credit. So,
I've had another guest on before that talked about that they've had his pictures or movies analyzed by, well, I don't remember who. It was such a long time ago, but whoever did the analysis believed that they were real. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just,
would not knowing what photographs he looked at or how they looked at them, did they have the original negatives? Uh, you can go on YouTube and look at those flying ones and decide for yourself. And I think it'll take like 30 seconds to decide whether that's authentic or not. I mean, it, it was I'm sorry, it was laughable. It was so bad. It was just, they just look like dangling Christmas decorations. And we're going like, that's nothing to see here. Move along. So whatever they analyze, and I never kept up with it after we dropped the case. So if there was something that came up later, you know, maybe there was something that they could verify, but what we saw, there was nothing to it. The thing that I still baffled after that incident at Wendell's home, the Air Force guy never came back to my place. How he knew that envelope was in Wendell's drawer or how it got there, I have no idea. Uh, and if he was an Air Force investigator or whatever, and just wanted to, you know, uh, um, reveal that this was not what it appeared to be, I don't know. But he disappeared completely. Never saw him again after that.
Well, that's a fascinating story. What about
Yeah.
something close to your previous neck of the woods, and that is the Phoenix Lights?
Yeah, the Phoenix Lights is a great case. Actually saw that live on television. I was already in Southern California at the time, but we saw that live on television. We go like, wow, people talk about, oh, why don't they ever just appear over a populated area? And there have been numerous cases where they have. There's a famous one, I believe it's in either Italy or Brazil, where there was a large UFO that came over a soccer field at one time and made a big hubbub, but you never hear about that case anymore. With the Phoenix Lights, that's a mass sighting. Uh, Dozens of people reported seeing large triangular UFO with lights all the way from Nevada to northern Mexico. So it went a long way. Even Kurt Russell, the actor Kurt Russell, reported seeing the craft from his plane when he was flying into Sky Harbor in Phoenix. And the reports that came out later, oh, these are Air Force flares. They weren't flares. Anybody can look at flares drop from jets and see that these are clearly not flares. They were up there for hours over the city. Um, were they part of this large triangular craft? That's the thing. The triangular craft that was seen earlier in the evening. The lights that appeared over the city were later that night. But were they, flares? Absolutely not. I mean, I've seen flares drop from planes before, and these weren't flares. What were they? I don't know, but I think it's one of the more legitimate cases that we can point to in the history of the phenomenon. Uh, when we back in the 70s, there was pressure in the media. Why do these things always appear to only one person in some rural community, some soybean farmer in the way out in the he's the only one that's seen it? Well, when these mass sighting cases came up, they were like, here you go. Here's a mass sighting case. Everyone saw this. It was filmed. It was photographed. It's an excellent case, and I believe it was one of the legitimate ones that certainly has never been explained. It was even witnessed by Governor Simonson, who initially his press conference, he came out the following day of the press conference and tried to dismiss it with a kind of little comedy skit. He had one of his staff members dressed up like an alien in handcuffs. So it was very embarrassing. And it really appalled the people who had seen it. And he got a lot of blowback from that and admitted later that he had witnessed the craft as well. Um, and he was a pilot and said that, hey, this was larger than anything I'd ever seen before. And people described it as Phoenix is in a valley, and people describe this thing as being so large that the wingspan stretched from one side of the valley to the other, which is, having been in Phoenix many times, it's hard to imagine something that large. I mean, and it would have to be flying very low to even perceive it like that. So quite a good case.
Were you a prop maker? Is that what you did in the movie business? Were you a prop maker?
I started out doing makeup special effects. I worked on the first television series called Project UFO on NBC that was produced by Jack Webb. We used to refer to it as Dragnet to the Stars. It ran 2 seasons, and I did makeup special effects for that. I also worked at 2 local television stations in Tucson at K-Gun TV Channel 9, which was an ABC affiliate, and KZAZ, Channel 11, which was an independent studio. I worked on local shows there doing makeup special effects. And it went into costuming because I do the makeup. They go like, well, we don't have a costume for this. So, okay, I put together a costume as well. Because back in that time, you didn't have a team. Today, the last couple of Marvel Disney films I worked on literally had 15,000 employees uh, um, that worked on it. And most people never met one another. It's not like people imagine. It's not like in the 30s or 40s where you go to a local studio and you do things there. The last on-lot studio I worked for was New World Pictures in Venice um, uh, for the movie Android, and then later another movie Mutant. That was Roger Corman's studio, and film people recognize that name, Roger Corman. He was king of the B sci-fi movies and horror and stuff. Um, and so that was the last actual studio lot I worked on. Everything else, you basically you have your own studio at home that you do things with, and but yes, most of my work in later years have been costuming and prop making and things of that nature. And for uh, Project UFO, I did do props for that, and also if you look at some of my other interviews and stuff, I did a lot of model making for a UFO museum in Minnesota in 1978, which is another story entirely concerning disclosure, which we won't get into now, but we've talked about in previous interviews.
Well, the reason I bring it up is I wanted to get your take on the alien autopsy film.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. When I first saw that, I knew immediately that this isn't real for a lot of reasons. First of all, it was so obviously a bad sculpt. It was just really bad. And I go like, oh my God, I do better than that on my worst day. And it was so rigid. It was obviously not a real human body. In my law enforcement career, part of your academy training, and I was also a certified EMT as well, uh, as part of my work. You're going to be involved in autopsies. You're going to see autopsies. And this was not like any real autopsy. In fact, you wouldn't even call that if it would be a vivisection. It wouldn't even be an autopsy. You already know why an autopsy is conducted to determine a cause of death or if a crime occurred. And so you wouldn't conduct an autopsy on a dead alien. You would conduct a vivisection. And it would be such an elaborate thing. It wouldn't be a one and done thing. It would probably be stretched over months or even years. And you'd probably work from the head to the toe, and you'd be examining tissues. You might take one tissue sample. Um, you might just take the brain, and a team would be working on that. It wouldn't be anything like they showed in the film. And of course, in 2006, Santelli came clean and said, "Hey, yeah, no, we did this in a living room in London." He tried to backtrack and say, "Well, it was actually based on a real film I saw, which he didn't have any provenance for, and couldn't, the people that showed me the film, I can't tell you who they are, and all this, and I just recreated it from what I remembered seeing." But no, it was just a money grab, is what it was. And there are a lot of I've seen so many alien autopsies and interviews, and I have never seen anything that, in my eye, gives me that, yeah, this is real or could be real. Uh, there's only one photograph I've ever seen, and I'm still trying to get that verified with the Cape Girardeau incident. There were two photographs taken at the scene that disappeared in over the years, and I believe we had one at A.P.R.O, and I was able to find that again. I've sent it to via Richard Dolan to Ryan Wood, who's the authority on Cape Girardeau, to see what he thinks if this photograph is one of the two missing photographs, which shows two men suspending a what's supposed to be a dead alien, which, yeah, I would have to say, unless you see the photograph, it's almost indescribable what this thing is. It certainly doesn't look like any terrestrial creature. It's certainly odd looking, and it does fit. The only witness to the living witness to the original photographs did a sketch of what he saw in the photograph, and this matches that sketch. I was never able to uh, um, verify it myself, so I was hoping Ryan would be able to, but I haven't heard back from him since then. But that's the only thing I've ever seen that I would say, yeah, this possibly is real, other than the death mask that we were going to put in the museum in 2008 in Minnesota. That I think might also be authentic of a cast of an actual alien, a half mask cast, death mask of an alien. And again, that particular artifact, I was never able to get the provenance on it, who provided it to us, to A.P.R.O to put in the museum. It supposedly was part of the museum curators that obtained that. And again, that's a whole nother story that we could get into it some other time. But I think that possibly was authentic too. But those are the only two things I've ever seen in 50 years that I would give any credence to.
What about the Chinese airport UFO case?
I hope I can pronounce this correctly. It starts at X. XIA Zeno Zenon, China.
I think it's like Zhao Shan or something like that.
Zhao Shan, yeah. China 2010, which in of film and photographs, I think is a smoking gun. It's if I had to give you my top five best physical evidence, or photographic evidence, it would be right up there because it was photographed from numerous angles on the ground. It was reported at the airport radar flight tower. They shut down the air the airlines coming into the airport. It was offline for an hour. It was videotaped from two locations. The videotape is very clear, very distinct. And the one of the videotapes actually show it taking off over the city, which once you see that videotape, which you can see on Eyes on Cinema, it's on YouTube. Once you see that, you can't unsee it. I really those people that I know involved in the hearings, I said, show this videotape in a public hearing. For some reason, people never see this particular video or the either one of the videos or the photographs. It's undeniable. You can't attribute that to anything terrestrial, particularly the takeoff. You're going like, what I just see. It was a cigar-shaped ship. It was shining down a very unusual beam onto the airport and surrounding structures. And you can clearly see it in the video. And it's clearly recorded in the photographs, dozens and dozens of photographs. It's quite a remarkable thing. And I would urge, if you put that in your on your detachments here on the channel, I would urge people to go look at that video, and it's remarkable, really is.
What about the Inkley Moore case?
The Inkley Moore case, and you can still see many videos about that. That was supposed to be a photograph of an alien, and that was 1988. I wrote down some notes here. That was 1987, but it didn't appear. The photograph didn't appear until 19. a 99 in Fate magazine. So it was like an unreported case for a long time, and it really picked up steam back then. Uh, um, and it's a blurry photograph. The first time I saw it, you really can't make out what it is. The individual who reported it, and he was interviewed quite a few times. He went under an alias, uh, Philip Spencer. Um, his real name was Hanson, John Hanson. Claimed to be a retired police officer and claimed missing time. He said he was out on the moors, saw this creature, photographed it, got a shaky, blurry picture of it, claimed it was a green-skinned, alien, which is uh, a rare account. There was another case in the 60s where they some kids painted a monkey green, and uh, that's another case. That's where the sort of little green men actually came from, was from that 1960s case with the green monkey. But here's another green alien, which cast doubt on it, the veracity of it. But he did claim to undergo hypnosis. He did do regressive hypnosis and claimed that he was taken aboard the craft at that time and everything. But later on, he admitted that it was a hoax and that the photograph was of a miniature toy that he had taken a picture of on the moors. But even today, you can see lengthy articles on the Inkling War case, but it was a hoax. It was not real. Why people do these things, I've never known anybody that's made any money, off this. A lot of people that people think they'll call somebody a grifter or whatever because they're at conventions or they write books. Nobody's making money off this. Even prolific authors, and I know many people, they don't make any money off this. It's they're really, it's more passion. They want to get to the truth. They're not profiting from this. If anything, it's a deterrent. I never spoke about my work with A.P.R.O for years and years. Certainly didn't speak about it, in my capacity with Homeland Security. And for all those, there's a lot of associations now with Homeland Security and um, uh, UFO investigation, and we never touched on that ever. It was all about, you know, preventing terrorist attacks. Is what we were looking at, domestically or foreign, because I did spend some time in the Middle East. Uh, but we never had anything to do with UFOs. And like I said, there's nobody making any money off this. If someone's hoaxing it, I can't tell you why they would want to do it, other than that. I guess there's some people that like to put up a clip that it could go viral. Maybe they could monetize that, but again, it's not worth it. Why would you do that?
Hmm.
You know.
Well, that makes me think of Bob Lazar. What do you think about his story?
Oh, I do believe Bob's story. Having done background investigations myself, his story, there is no way he got into Los Alamos without having the academic credentials that he claims he had. Back in the 80s, could you go and deep six his academic credentials at university stuff? Easily. Um, and I mean, even his birth certificate is missing. His mother does have a copy of it. I don't know if she's still around, but she did have a copy of it. But his birth certificate went missing, and he Jeremy Corbell did find his background investigator for EG&E, EG&G, uh, where he went out to S4 and confirmed that he was being background investigated for this. And if you work at Los Alamos, even in my capacity, Homeland Security, we were subject to a polygraph examination every 6 months. We didn't always have that. We didn't always get, but you would have, two people, FBI, come to your office. They would had a questionnaire, this blah blah blah, and ask all these questions. And if they felt it necessary, you could be polygraphed. make sure you're telling the truth. And that's part of working at some place like Los Alamos. Every 6 months, you're subject to polygraph if they think you're doing anything weird or they just want to check on you. So Bob, would have been rigorously um, uh, investigated before he got that job. He was listed in the Los Alamos directory as a physicist. He brought George Knapp back to Los Alamos, showed him where he worked. People knew him. Hey, Bob, blah, 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 showed him all around. So I believe he's was quite credible. Some of the other things that he shared, uh, like the hand scanner, uh, although some people claim, oh, saw that in Close Encounters, that wasn't a well-known piece of equipment. I didn't even remember. I saw Close Encounters. I didn't even remember seeing it in the movie, but that was something else he brought up. He had his badge. He had his check stub, from Naval Intelligence. So I believe Bob is very legitimate. And you have to remember, Bob has been raided twice in 2004, and I think again it was here 2000. I think it's 2014. Um, with the FBI raided his place looking for radioactive materials and stuff. So he, that's something that you don't see very often. I believe he's legitimate. He knew, and again, you can watch this on the internet. He took people out 3 times to outside of Area 51 on the nights they were testing. He claimed they were testing the ships, and they did videotape it, and you can still see those tests on the internet today. Yeah, I think he was legitimate. The things that he shared from a standpoint of physics. Remember, this is late 1980s. I believe it was 89 when George did his interview with him. These weren't well-known concepts about gravity. We didn't even know gravity was a wave or particle, and he said it's a wave, which is something no one knew at the time. And of course, element 115 wasn't known at the time, and now it's been proven that we at least found an unstable version of 115. We haven't found a stable version that he had access to, but we have found an unstable version of it, which further solidifies what he said. And so I think he's legitimate. I don't know why people find it so controversial that about his education. I've canvassed classes. I have a bachelor's degree from through Homeland Security with Texas A&M, and it was basically what I would call canvassing. But I didn't have to go to Texas to get the bachelor's degree. It was kind of a sped up course. It was with Homeland Security and FEMA, and they ran us through it, and I got my degree that way. I never stepped into a university or anything. So, back in the 70s and 80s, you could actually, even in engineering classes, if the class was full, you could canvass the class. And if you could pass the exam at the end of that time, you could still get credit for that class, even though you weren't formally assigned the class. And you can still do that to this day. You can go to Stanford, you can canvass a class, even though you're not a formal student, and you can get academic credit for that. And so I don't have any problem with his accreditation. Clearly, Los Alamos didn't. And we know, like I said, from the directory that he did work there as a physicist. So
What about the English UFO landing case?
that was an interesting case. A lot of people don't know about that. I sent you a photograph. Maybe you can put that in the notes at the end. People would take a look at those ships. They were very tiny, 2 or 3 feet in diameter, and the UK government took it very seriously. It was on the Isle of Shelby, I believe. Got it on my notes here. Shepley, in 1967. They, found these landed UFOs, and they were very classic, saucer shaped with a little dome, metal. and they took it very seriously. And the military and law enforcement went out there. They actually blew one up, you know, a concerned, which is thinking back, what a stupid thing to do, but that's what they did. And they drilled into another one, and it was what they were. They were created by uh, the firm Bureau Royal Academy of Aerospace and Metal Engineering, and they just wanted to see if they could pass them off as real UFOs, and they put them out in the the woods and reported them, and apparently these things had something inside that made them buzz and stuff, and uh, I'm trying to think back to 1967. You know, these little tiny ships, would I think they're credible? I think possibly the concern was in the UK that maybe this was some leftover World War II mines or something, that they were more concerned that this was some type of German uh, ordnance that had been left behind, and might have been, you know, deadly. Because my looking at that, could I think that this was some type of German mine that had been dropped and had not been discovered? Yeah, that would be my first impression. I wouldn't think UFO, other than they had that classic UFO shape. They certainly could have been some type of landmine or some type of anti-tank device. And I think that's likely, more likely, what they were concerned about than this was some type of invasion force. But that's an interesting case that it went that far that they were actually physically blowing these things up and drilling into them and stuff. If they really suspected these were alien craft, that sounds like a foolish thing to try and do. But um, going back to the Bob Lazar case, Bob has shared in interviews and in the one book that published on the case that he co-wrote, that there had been an incident at S4 where they tried to cut into one of these particle accelerators from the ship, and it blew up. They were trying to cut into it with a plasma torch, and it blew up, and they pass it off as an unscheduled nuclear test. But apparently some people were killed, and he was replacing one of the people that was killed during that incident. So cutting into these things, it seems really foolish. But you know, if you're desperate, you can get somebody in there or a robot in there to cut into it. Be my guess. I don't want to be anywhere near it. And that was one of the concerns that Bob had, which really rang true. He was scared to death of you have to think about it. You're going to say you don't know, you know, are you going to catch some disease in his ship? Are you going to touch the wrong thing and blow it up or whatever? You have no idea what makes this thing tick or what you might be exposed to chemically or radioactively or whatever. I mean, it's a true unknown. It's just like a bomb tech. You know, you're coming on this device and you go like, "Hey, disarm this thing." You don't have any idea what's in it. You know, what fail-safe devices it might have or booby traps it might have, and that's, you know, what Bob was looking at in back engineering this craft. And when we talk about back engineering, I'm sure that's got to be upmost in engineers' minds if they're working on something like this. Um, you know, it's like Katsky said in his recent interviews on Weaponized with Jeremy and George's a show, and in his two books that they breached a UFO and entered it. Uh, that's got to be a scary thing. You know, I mean, how do you do it, and how do you do it safely and not, you know, destroy the craft or destroy yourself or whatever? Love to hear more about that, but it's got to be a really you know, tongue biting situation to try and do something like that.
So if these crash retrievals are real, do you think that they're not really getting, they're not really making much headway with them?
It's hard to say. Colonel Crusoe claimed that they had made some progress, and this is often uh, misinterpreted. Crusoe was given the ghostwriter who wrote the actual book Day After Roswell gave him the finished manuscript 24 hours before it was published, and he shared later with Gerald Alexander and George Knapp that there's all kinds of misinterpretations and errors in the book, and he didn't have an opportunity to correct them before it was published. Uh, he never said that they actually took the uh, artifacts that he brought to these different labs, one of them being Hughes aircraft, um, it, and actually developed anything. He said it inspired the work they were already working on, like Kevlar and light fiber optics. They didn't actually use this material, but it's, oh, here's an idea we didn't think of, and it inspired the work they were already working on. So possibly we've gleaned some tech from that. Um, but it's got to be a difficult thing to do. I mean, um, you don't even know if you're working with metal, for heaven's sakes. It's and you don't want to do anything that would be destructive. This comes up in archaeology all the time. Even when one of the things I did for Lucasfilms, we came across the only two surviving sets of stormtrooper armor from the third film. Where my first task was to authenticate them and which film. They didn't even know which film they came from the first three films. Well, I was able to authenticate these were from the third film. And they wanted reproductions made for their traveling museum. So that wasn't like, okay, I've got it, boss, just recast these. No, I had to, you know, show them in writing how we were going to do this, what we were going to use. I had to show academic papers that this casting technique won't harm them. And I had to pass this by the archivist and everything before we could even begin casting and making the reproductions, because we didn't want to damage the only original copies that we had of these costumes, and they were very fragile, very thin, very thin styrene plastic. And we were afraid, hey, if we cast these, it could rip off the paint, because if they just sprayed these with Tester's enamel, and there were already areas where it was peeling from the styrene because it wasn't a good hold on that. And so we didn't want to damage it, and we didn't want to be responsible for just destroying the only two surviving copies worn by Harrison Ford, Mark Hamill. So we had to be very careful and go through all the things. Well, now imagine having the only recovered, or one of the few recovered spacecraft. What are you going to do? You don't want to damage it, and there's probably a concern. You know, environmental contamination. Am I going to get germs off this, or am I going to put germs on it? You have no idea. You don't know how this technology works. Is there some type of physical connection? Are you sitting in a chair that knows your DNA and responds with your thoughts? So many questions that would come up from an engineering standpoint, that you've got to be on pins and needles working on something like this. And it was like I was sharing about the alien autopsy. Um, you wouldn't spend just a couple of hours on something like that. You would spend years on that. We're still experimenting with human bodies and learning the secrets of human bodies, let alone a creature from another planet. Oh, you would spend ages on. You would have the best of the best looking at tissue samples and taking all kinds of X-rays and scans and measurements and photographs, and it would be likely done in some type of secured amphitheater, not in a size of which you can see in the movie, very small quarters, living space like that. There's no way you would have dozens of people in there, cameras rolling, catching it from every angle. Um, so yeah, it would be examining this. I'm I have no idea how far they would get on something like this.
Better.
Like giving a cell phone to a caveman.
Yeah.
How far would he get?
It would probably be better to find a crashed vehicle that was all broken apart, so at least you can see the insides.
Yeah, and the descriptions, Jacques Vallée describes the recovery of an egg-shaped craft in New Mexico as having broken apart, and they could see underneath the main floor of it, which would be helpful. I actually think, some people have shared, like Gary Nolan shared that some people suggest these are gifts. I'm more of the mind that this is space debris, not human space debris, but these are discarded ships that in the same way we let test boosters, drop to the ocean, or Soviets, or sorry, the Russians today, they just let it hit the ground. They don't care, where it lands. And we still have space debris dropping out of orbit and burning up. Some burns up in the atmosphere, some makes it to the ground. I think that's what we're seeing. I don't think they're giving us gifts. I don't think they care. I think these are just expended craft, and they've either served its purpose and they get another ship and take off, and they just leave it. You know, uh, let's say let's say from this point in time, we went back in time and we left a cell phone behind, let's say in ancient Rome. What good would that be to anybody? They wouldn't even know it was a device. They would probably think it was a solid object, just something, glass, this is some type of weird stone. They wouldn't think anything of it. I mean, it'd be almost worthless to leave it behind. Oh, here's a gift. See if you can figure this out. Would we give a nuclear reactor to even someone 100 years ago? Well, let's say 200 years, because it's almost 100 years since we started nuclear reactors. But let's say 200 years ago, if we gave them a nuclear reactor, it would probably kill everybody that was trying to investigate it. So no, I think it's just more likely space debris or abandoned space technology that they just leave it there. And it reminds me of the Morlocks in H.G. Wells' George Powell's movie The Time Machine, where the Morlocks dragged the time machine into their cave there, and they didn't know what to do with it. It's beyond their technology. So,
Well, here's something from recent events. What is your take on Three Eye Atlas?
it's an anomaly. There are a lot of questions about it. I heard Avi Loeb's um, lengthy analysis and assertion that there are metal objects flying around this thing. Could it be an interstellar probe? I have no idea. There's so many things going on in interstellar space, um, supernovas and explosions, and it could be almost anything. If it's a comet, it's a very unusual comet. Um, I don't think it's a ship, you know, poised on invading with lizard people or anything like that. But it's certainly an interesting thing. I'd like to know more about it. It's unfortunate we can't just fly out there and take a closer look at it. Um, do some of our deep space telescopes and satellites probably know more about it than we do, maybe. Uh, I don't think any. In this case, I don't believe that NASA or the military is hiding anything. I think they're just as perplexed about what it means and what it is as everybody else is. Uh, but it could be anything. It could be the remnants of a ship that blew up in space, an extraterrestrial craft that blew up in space and it's been floating for millions of years. Who knows? But most likely, I think, with the exception of those, if obvious correct, and there are metallic objects, flying next to it, maybe it is some type of probe. But if I, at first blush, I would say it's some type of odd but natural body that's from some interstellar explosion or planet that collapsed. Who knows? But I don't think it's at this point. I don't see that. I don't think it's a spacecraft. I really don't. Because if it is, it's a very slow one. It'd be like sending the Santa Maria explore space. You know, uh, if what we've seen over the last 50 years with the type of craft and technology that we think we're observing, that non-human intelligence has access to, why they would send something so slow moving doesn't, to me, ring true. Doesn't make any sense, because it appears that they can go at will back and forth across interstellar space with no problem.
What about the classic Betty and Barney Hill case?
The Betty and Barney Hill case is another, I believe, a very good case. Um, it People think, they're again, they're looking backwards, and they haven't read the source materials in depth. They didn't, come out immediately afterwards and go like the day after, say, oh yeah, we were abducted by aliens. That didn't come out. It came out by accident at a meeting they were at. It came out almost a year later, but it was investigated by Project Blue Book. It's one of the most well documented cases in Blue Book. It Radar confirmation was confirmed by Peace Air Force Base on the day and in the time frame and area where Betty and Barney said they saw the spacecraft. The spacecraft was also witnessed by High Patrol in the area at the same time. So for them to have it, and they didn't have knowledge of that. So for them to have knowledge of even just a UFO that Peace Air Force Base and the High Patrol both recorded at the same time and date would be astronomical. You're not going to get that kind of coincidence. And of course, they both Betty and Barney had regressive hypnosis. They passed polygraphs. In fact, F. Lee Bailey conducted Betty's polygraph, famous attorney, and her star map that was verified are all things that couldn't be aren't likely to have been hoaxed. In fact, the Air Force took Betty so seriously, even up until the time of her passing. They used to have her brief incoming Air Force officers at the Pentagon. She would be tasked to go there and tell her story. Now, why would you do that if you didn't believe there was something to her, her encounter? But she did that, annually right up until the time of her death. So certainly the Air Force took her seriously, and there are a lot of misconceptions about her encounter, uh, uh, like the telepathy, that people think that they only spoke to her telepathically, which is not true. They did speak to one another in a language she didn't understand. When they spoke to her, it was in what she described as like a broken English. The lead alien did speak to her telepathically, but I want to caveat here, it wasn't mind reading, it was telepathic communication. So think of it like someone talking to you with a cell phone. You could almost consider a cell phone a type of telepathy, in that you can hear someone's thoughts from around the world on this device. And I believe that the lead alien there that she described, the leader, he wore a skull cap, and I think that, and that was also described by Sergeant Mooney, Charles Mooney, in his captors, that the lead alien spoke to him telepathically and had a skull cap. I think this is some type of communication device that allows telepathic communication. And we do have that. I mean, there's been a number of articles just recently about Google using electronic means to read thoughts. Now, there's a number of articles on that. And I know Richard's wife, Tracy, had spoken about Google work in reading thoughts mechanically and putting them online and stuff, using graphic interfaces to show what you're thinking. So I think that that's what we're seeing here. It's not because they clearly couldn't read her thoughts, because when the medical examiner on that ship examined Barney separately, he removed Barney's false teeth and was surprised, what are these? And he brought him to the leader, and the medical examiner spoke to the leader, the alien leader, in a language that Betty didn't understand. And then the leader spoke to her telepathically. Why did Barney's teeth come out and yours don't? So if they could have read her mind, they would have even needed to ask, what are these? They would know. So it was just a means of telepathic communication, not mind reading. And for all those who aspire to, oh, that's our next evolution, telepathic communication, in my opinion, that's de-evolution, because I can see that in possibly early man, we did have a greater telepathic ability. However that worked, maybe we were reading magnetic, electromagnetic signals, that surround brain, EGGs that are emitted from the brain. There was some way we were more telepathically communicated. But think of that would be just such a disadvantage. Just think of it this way: if everyone could read everyone's mind, and your loved one asks you, does this outfit make me look fat? Do you want them to read your mind? Absolutely not. Imagine trying to negotiate a contract and everyone can read everyone else's mind. That's a big disadvantage. And it's not something you would want everybody walking down the street to read your mind, and just to have that would be such a lack of privacy. So I can see evolutionarily that no, you would not want this out. Language would be an evolutionarily superior to mind reading, unless you were the only one that could read minds. If you're the only one that can read minds, that's a big advantage. But if everyone can do it, no, it's a huge disadvantage, and you would want to conceal your thoughts from everybody. So I really believe that this telepathic communication that we hear so much about in abductions is if it is biological, it's something that I don't find desirable. And if it's mechanical, it's something we're already doing. We all have technology that we can do it. So that's my take on the telepathy thing. And yeah, I would say that there's enough physical evidence with the Betty and Barney Hill case that it's actual. They examined their vehicle. They found marks on the back of the vehicle that showed magnetic anomalies, glowed in the dark. Their dog who was in the backseat of the car, had evidence of radiation poisoning. It was a dachshund. It started shedding hair when it came back, and had sores pronounced on its body. These were all documented by Project Blue Book. So I think that's Betty Barney Hill case is a very good case, but it's certainly not the first abduction case. There were others before that, but it's the most well-known one.
You mentioned the age of disclosure. What effect has that had, and where are we now with disclosure?
Well, I hope it's had a very positive effect. It's getting more of the information from the government to the general public that the phenomenon is real, and that we do have captured craft and we are back engineering it, and we do have quite possibly contact with extraterrestrial life or non-human intelligence, wherever they're from. And it's getting that information out. We had hoped to do that with UFOs Are Real back in 79, but it did have the same effect. Now you have a much wider audience than we did, even though we had a theatrical release at that time in 79, went all over the world. And you can still see that UFO documentary on YouTube. But it's getting the information out there. I believe, and I said this in February of last year, that I believe within the next 12 months, I'm hedging my bets now because we only have a few weeks left in this year, but I do believe we're right on the cusp of disclosure. I'd like to share with your audience. I've been pressing with allies and people within the government and whistleblowers to have the Senate Select Intelligence Committee, if not fully release the transcript testimony of whistleblowers that they've received over the last 3 years, at least a redacted summary of what they've learned. And there are other people pressing other avenues. They still are going to give the UAP bill another go, which I applaud. Anybody wants it, there use any means possible for disclosure, good, I support it. But I believe the truth is out there and it's in these transcripts. It's available now. I've been working on this for the last literally 3 years, and within the last couple of months, I got some serious pushback, obfuscation, lies. I still mind my own business, but I'm still pressing forward. I want to see justice done. I'm not, people today online, they want disclosure to prove UFOs are real. For me, we're beyond that. I believe long ago we proved UFOs are real and that this planet is being visited by intelligences outside the planet, whether they're from a parallel universe or a different dimension or another planet, wherever they're coming here, they're visiting. I believe there's plenty of evidence to show. So I'm beyond that. And I would share with people in the audience, petition the members. There's 21 members of the Senate Intelligence Committee. Email them respectfully, call their offices respectfully, and ask them to release a summary of what the whistleblowers have already said. That's what I would urge you to do. That's what I'm continuing to lobby for. We do have allies in that. We believe that there is at least 6 members of the 21 that will vote to release this information. They do not need presidential authorization to release it. The president can object to them releasing it because they do have to share with him they're going to release it, and he can object. But if he does object, then they simply need to take it to the full House to vote to release it. And they only need a majority. They don't need a quorum. They just need a majority vote to release it. So I think that evidence is right there. It could be released tomorrow. And the Senate should take the narrative by the reins and get ahead of this before some other country like Russia or Brazil or Canada or somebody else does, because we'll be behind the 8 ball then.
Well, if you had to revise your date for disclosure, what would it be now?
Oh, I still think that it could be any day. I first started talking about that in February, so I'd say, yeah, I mean, it could very well be, sometime right after the first year. And some people have suggested that. There was a rumor going around just a month ago that possibly the executive branch was going to make an announcement after the first year. And what I've heard is that the only reason that they haven't addressed it is because of everything else that's going on. I mean, you got wars all over the world. You got worldwide economic concerns. I mean, I even go back and forth, have for years, can the planet adjust to this? I always say, oh yeah, we can handle this because I've seen, I know it's true. I can handle it. Hasn't hurt my religious beliefs or giving me PTSD or anything like that. I can handle it. But I've met people that I've suggested to that I don't know that they could handle it. It would hurt them. You know, it definitely would leave a mark on economically because the stock market depends on certainty. And if you say, hey, even if you can't do anything with this equipment, um, it's going to create uncertainty in the market. Do you have a new energy source? Do you have new materials that could destabilize the market? There would be some uncertainty for a time, and possibly some sectors of the stock market would go down. Could he create jealousies amongst other countries that don't have this um, technology and, ramp them up? Hey, we're going to go get it, or cause a fight over it, because everyone's going to demand. As soon as whoever comes out first and says, yeah, we have it, the UN's going to say, well, you got to share that with everybody. Everyone's going to demand it. Even the countries that already have it themselves, we suspect Russia and China definitely have some of this stuff themselves. They're going to demand, well, we got to see it. You can't keep this from the world. Everyone's going to want it. And there are people that you don't want to have it, that you're not going to share it with. Uh, we did that with nuclear fission in the Peace for Atoms thing. And what we end up with, we ended up with India creating a nuclear bomb. So do we want, someone creating a gravitational weapon of some type? Just imagine being able to control gravity. You have the ability to control gravity. You could crush tanks. You could crush entire armies or send them flying into space. You could just obliterate things with gravity. So do you really want this? The technology that Bob Lazar describes that he witnessed in the lab, oh my God, it would be, what a weapon that would make. Do you want that to fall in the wrong hands? No. So it would have to be a closely guarded secret. So myself included, I go like, do we really want it out? But it's something that you have to deal with. It's I share it. It's like um, a lie in a close relationship. Eventually, you got to deal with it. It's got to come out. So it's better you deal with it now and get over it. The chips will fall where they may. And the longer you wait, it's not going to be better, because someone's going to, come to and we have a lot of young whistleblowers. They're very idealistic. And some of them, I think, are a little on naive side. And I don't think they realize how serious this is. So then they just go, oh, this is the best thing ever, and this will create peace, and we have free energy. And I go like, you better think about this. You better think about this. But I'm with you. I think we need this out, but just don't leave the reservation. Don't go rogue.
Well, Allan, after watching this video, people may want to reach out to you and correspond. Are you open to that? And if so, how can they contact you?
Oh, absolutely. And I've given my email address out, and I do get correspondence. It's bronzearmory at gmail.com. One word, bronzearmory at gmail.com. And I won't argue with people. I've had some people that want to argue points. I'll share with you my best, understanding of a circumstance or case or whatever. But I'm not going to go tit for tat. I mean, I have a life. I have things I have to do, and I do take people's inquiries seriously, and I do spend time respond. I won't just do a quick note, like yes or no. I'll explain my thinking, and And sometimes I'll get a letter and I'll go, oh, okay, I need to think about this. And in a day or two, I'll respond at length what I think. But I'm not going to respond to, but then, or if I've had some things like that where it's just go on and on. I go like, look, I've shared my thoughts. That's as far as I can go. You know, that's it. But please, I welcome it, and I'll do the best I can to respond. I know people have questions, and I really I feel like Richard Dolan that the history has been forgotten. There's things I see rehashed all the time on uh, and I was just writing to James Fox the other day. He was on Jesse Michael's show, and he was talking about Coral Lorenzen. He's where he learned about the Holloman Air Force landing thing, and he referred to Coral as, I heard she was a well-known journalist. I go like, oh my God, he didn't know she was the press secretary for Holloman Air Force Base. So I wrote him and said, James, let me share this with you. So things that are really important have been forgotten. People are just rehashing. I'm going like, and James is legit. I mean, he knows his stuff. He's done a great work with the Virginia case, and he's very knowledgeable. And he's done a lot of great work on the Rendlesham case. I forget which of his documentary films. He's the only one that documented in one of the nuclear vaults, a hole was drilled through with this laser that came down from this craft, and he's the only one that filmed this. Talked to one of the Air Force people there and showed it, and no one ever talks about that. That's real physical evidence. Nothing could have drilled through that vault. That it's like 3 feet thick rebar and cement where the nuclear weapons were housed. That was a smoking gun that no one ever talked about. He's the only one that documented that. Excellent guy, but I did share with him that Coral was more than just a talented journalist. I mean, she wrote 8 books, and she was the face of A.P.R.O for the public and stuff. So, also would like to share with the audience that Richard will be releasing his second volume of the his USO trilogy, dating from the early 1800s to present day UFO incidents, and we had hoped to get that second volume out here for Christmas, but we weren't able to. We did a half dozen more illustrations for the book for other cases, and hopefully here January, maybe early February, we'll get it out and people can get that second volume. And then we have a third volume too is coming out, and it's just excellent work. Richard did such a great job on that book, and it's the most comprehensive. And now that we're getting more traction, people are understanding that a lot of this activity may be related to the ocean. There may be ocean bases. Admiral Gallaudet claims there are, and other people, Burchett, saying, yeah, there are bases on the ocean. Maybe there are. And this book covers almost now, I think, 700 incidents from the 1800s to present day. So it's a lot of information. I did over 200 illustrations for it.
That's great. Allan, before we finish up, can you leave us with a last positive message?
Well, as I've shared before, I believe disclosure is right around the corner. I've seen things like this before, government related. You just can't hide it. Too many people know it. It's gotten this synergy now that I saw a statistic a couple months ago. 56% of the globe believe that we're in contact with non-human intelligence. 56%. Not that just UFOs are real, but that we're in contact with alien intelligence. And I don't believe that can be hidden any longer. I do understand technical difficulties in releasing this information specifically and sharing what we can is going to be challenging, but it's going to happen. And I say it could happen any day, within weeks, within months, but very soon.
Allan, Thank you for your message, and thank you for being my guest again.
Thank you for having me on again. I really appreciate it, and I hope everyone learned something today. Thank you.
Thanks for watching the JeffMara podcast. I really appreciate you. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. And if you do, there are loyalty badges and other perks depending on your level of membership. All you need to do is click the join button underneath the video to find out more. Thank you for your support.